way. So I think it was a useful debate, and it led us to what is now perhaps a more focused debate on the Asylum Support Office and another annual report. But I mean, I think as colleagues will know, this is a critical moment in this debate in relation to what is happening in the Mediterranean. There couldn't be a more important time for Dr. Visser to be here. Also, we have, in terms of our members here, Jean Lambert, who's the rapporteur on the support office, and also colleagues who are rapporteurs on the asylum package, which we mentioned in the previous debate. So I'm looking forward to a very informed debate, and for new members, this is the Asylum Support Office not just intrinsically as an issue, as an agency, but also its symbolism in relation to well, how the asylum package is not working. You've heard the word solidarity is a big issue for us. So, of course, the report, and Dr. Visser, you indicated that you're going to make a brief statement. We're going to take a debate and questions, so spend most of the time doing that, and then you're going to come back. So rather than make a very long statement where you've really kind of issued the report, and we've got also the multi-annual work programme, so rather than spend too long doing that, you're going to make a fairly brief statement of the key points, and then we're going to open the floor, and then perhaps you'll come back, and then we can do it flexibly in that way. So you're going to make some key points now, and then I'm going to open the floor. So thank you for being here, and look forward to hearing your comments.
Honourable Chairman, honourable members, thank you very much for the invitation, and allow me to congratulate you at the beginning of this new parliamentary term and wish you all the success and inspiration in your very important work. You can fully count on my and my agency's disposal in that work. I will be as brief as possible. To facilitate that, I have circulated, I hope it is circulated, a short paper summarising the main developments at this moment. The main reason for being here is the annual report on the state of asylum. It has already, to my very great pleasure, become a reference document, and we intend every year to proceed like that and to make it a sort of practical handbook on the state of asylum. If we look at last year, because officially the report is about last year, we see that there are three main flows in 2013: Syria, Russian Federation and Western Balkan. If we look into these different flows, then we see quite different characteristics. For Syria, well, I don't need to go into that. The situation is, as we see every day on television, and also this year, even last month, it is increasing and increasing. If I look at numbers, already Syrian applications are in the top 3 asylum applications of 19 member states. That in itself indicates the serious situation. Russia is a totally different situation. Last year we saw an important rise, but at the end of the year it went down considerably. If we look at the sort of applications, then we can see that applicants from Russia, mainly from Chechnya, are in the majority being rejected. If we look at the Western Balkan, we even see a different characteristic. The Western Balkan is a continuous situation for many years now. It continues also in this first half of this year, being an important part of the asylum influx and having a very large negative outcome in applications. The rejection rate is about 96, and in some countries even nearing the 100%. So very different. Syrians, they get protection. I don't need to explain. People from Western Balkan in general do not qualify for protection. If I just jump to the latest trends of the first half of this year, then you see that the rise that was last year already, last year we had the highest number since the start of Eurostat collection, that continues this year. Not surprisingly, I mentioned Syria, I mentioned Iraq, and I mentioned Ukraine, and then it is an understandable situation. Eritrea suddenly has popped up in the picture as well, quite unexplainable. Unexplained so far. The situation in Eritrea has been bad for many years and is still very bad, but that in itself does not explain that sudden increase. We are looking into it together with the Member States and experts to find out more about the mechanism. What have we been doing this year, last year and this year? Mainly concentrating on supporting the Member States to implement the asylum acquis. Last year, the Parliament accepted the asylum package, a very important next step, and now the focus should be on implementing what everybody has promised to do during the legislative process. That is being done by giving common training, developing manuals that make it possible to implement in a very practical way the legislation that has been accepted, by providing common country of origin information. Last year we made a study on the situation in the Western Balkans. As I just indicated, that is a very special situation, so the push and pull factors for the Western Balkans as an area in itself. We are going to publish very shortly, probably beginning of next week, a report on Chechnya, and in the next few weeks a report on Somalia. And we're working on an update of the security situation in Afghanistan. So working on the different countries of origin and at the same time bringing together experts on Iraq, on Syria, on the Ukraine and on other places that are important. I mentioned, and then, Chairman, I keep my word in keeping it very short. In the context of the Task Force Mediterranean, the Commission already referred to it, so I don't need to go into it very deep, but maybe 2 points to mention. One is that we have started, I would say finally, because it has been an item already since the programme of The Hague of 2004, finally setting steps in the direction of joint processing. And the first steps, cautious steps, are promising. Second, we work together with Europol, Frontex and Eurojust, an interesting combination, on a project, one in Malta and one in Italy, in trying to get a better view on the phenomenon of the criminal organizations that are behind the flows. An important and, I would say, new area where certainly we'll in time come back to. We're only able to do the work when we are receiving the necessary budgetary and human resources. And in that context, I want to thank the LIBE Committee for its amendment. I warmly thank you, because that is very important. It is stressing the work. It's also recognizing that without people you can't work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert, for that, and thank you for being brief, because it gives us a chance now to interact with you, and then you can come back after some of the comments. And colleagues, we've got the obviously we have the operational part of what the Asylum Support Office does, and please target your questions to this, but also remember it's about the quality of asylum decision making, which I think the Support Office also takes part in, and the political stance, the small p stance that you can take, because you see what is happening. So colleagues can also direct their questions in this way as well, and let's start a dialogue on this. Perhaps maybe we can just kick off with maybe if that's okay, to kick off with the rapporteur, perhaps Jean, do you want to start the debate with your questions and comments, and then we'll take the rest of the list? Please indicate if you want to speak from now on. Jean, you go first.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you very much for the report and the clarity of those. I think many of us will welcome what you've said about the implementation side. I wonder if you wanted to comment further about how the new part of the Dublin regulation on early warning and preparedness is actually being sort of accepted and developed amongst member states, given the battle there was to actually get that happening. That in terms as well of the role of the consultative forum, if you could maybe tell us a little about how that is now being used, and if you could answer maybe why it is that while most countries are experiencing a rise in asylum applications, there seems to have been a drop in other member states, notably, in my view, Greece and Cyprus. And just wondering, if you could sort of explain if there are particular reasons behind that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the next one is Mr. Kirkhope, Timothy.
I'll be very brief this time, Chairman, because I made my general political points or principal points before. Can I just ask 3 points then quickly? Regional protection programmes. Are we really satisfied that these protection programmes working with third countries are actually having any real effect? I'm not sure. I think there is a little bit to look at there. Secondly, in terms of European countries themselves, we still have this situation where, because of a failure to process, a failure to deal with arrivals in their first country in the EU, we are seeing large numbers of people moving around Europe to various other states. We've got that problem at Calais. We've had the problem in other countries too, who have received similar numbers, who have not been processed or dealt with at the first point of arrival in the EU. Is there a view here that we should be doing rather more to add to the resources that we provide to those first countries? Is that the problem? Or is it because we don't have common standards in place in a number of countries that can deal with people adequately, and that's why they're moving around so much? Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one is Sylvie Guillaume.
Oui, merci. Je serai également.
Thank you. I'll keep it very brief as well. As regards the report, thank you for the report. It's very high calibre. I think you are right to mention that this culture of cooperation, which is difficult to bed down, is spreading now between member states and the Commission and your office. And I think you're right to dwell on the role played by the office. I've got one comment and 2 quick questions. Firstly, then, the comment. The report discusses the asylum situation. In future, we should be able to look forward, to forward plan. There's a lot of analysis here, and I think the criticism should allow us to make progress with regard to other developments. The questions next. I'd like you to take stock, if you have the opportunity, about the various arrangements between the office and a lot of non-member states of the EU, in particular the Swiss after their referendum in February. And could you also tell us something about the budget, because there is an increasing diversity of tasks coming the way of the office, so I think it's worth looking at resources and the office itself. Thank you.
Sylvie. Next is Mrs. Ferrara.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested to get some understanding about what you're planning to do with specific support programs for border countries like Italy, which is under a lot of pressure. Under the Dublin regulation, there are a number of problems here in terms of providing international protection. We're finding it difficult to meet the bureaucratic deadlines for all the procedures, and this isn't a purely timing related issue. It's also to do with the protection of fundamental rights. On the one hand, in Italy you see immigrants coming in search of freedom, but they're in fact held, detained for months, even a year, before they get any refugee status recognition. And they're being held or detained in that situation in their countries. It's not what they were hoping for. And then they end up on the streets afterwards. On the other hand, you have European citizens concerned about the management of funds and social integration programs, which need to be set up to help countries deal better with the asylum situation. This is a chain system. There are lots of links to the chain. There are requests for international protection that then kick off a chain reaction of procedures. But if things go wrong, you end up with people being suspicious of foreigners and discrimination. So I'd like to ask specifically, what is the special plan, support plan, intended to do to support those countries facing the highest number of migratory flows?
Okay, thank you. Next one is Mrs. Daly. Miriam.
Grazie. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Wieser, and thank you to your agency and the work carried out so far. Recently, I had the occasion to visit the premises of the office, and I've seen the work done. I was impressed, positively impressed, when you consider the amount of resources, limited resources of the agency. But from today's presentation, I have to say that I am concerned about the figures that you have named of people requiring asylum. In 2013, you are claiming that there is another record year. Even 2014 will be a record year for applications. There is an increase in these people, in these asylum seekers. So my concern is that such a situation is creating pressure on the asylum systems and reception systems of the EU member states. And in this regard, I would like to appeal for a better role for EASO. I think it's already been referred to in the letter sent by Jean-Claude Juncker to the Commissioner designate for Immigration and Internal Affairs, and which I would like to see implemented in practice. I think Dr. Wieser will be the best person to say whether this can be done or not. It will be beneficial to see more work carried out by the EASO in the countries. I would like to see an agency that is moving from implementation to fully fledged projects. And these in very important areas, in the joint processing, for example, and other projects in this regard in the coming years. Two short questions. You mentioned the asylum package. Dr. Wieser mentioned this and said that everyone has to carry out their promises. I would like to know how we're going to arrive to this point. Hopefully we will get to this point and this asylum package will work out. You mentioned also the phenomena of organised crime with respect to immigration, and honestly I would like to see things done in practice. I'm afraid that we talk about this phenomena of organised crimes with relation to immigration after tragedies like the Lampedusa tragedy and the recent tragedy in the Mediterranean. Finally, for the office to really carry out its work properly and effectively, we have to see that they are given the right resources. I think an agency needs to have the proper mandate, the proper role, the right number of staff so that it can carry out its work, and also the economic resources necessary so that we can really address this crisis that we are facing.
Thank you. Next is Ska Keller.
Thank you. I very much agree with the sufficient resources which we've been also trying to table in the past years always. And I also very much agree with what you said about implementing the asylum package. And I think there we have still a lot to do if you just look at the rates of recognition of asylum status in the different member states, which very significantly. But the two things I want to ask is, first of all, in the mission letter to the designated Commissioner Avramopoulos, it says that he should tell EASO to work together with third countries, which has been ringing some alarm bells on our side, because EASO is supposed to help with asylum procedures and not supposed to help with keeping people away, which is usually the thing that third country cooperation seems to be dealing with. Could you explain if you have any more information about what this cooperation with third country means? Do you have any more clue about what you're supposed to do in the future with relation to third countries? And in relation to that directly, I found it interesting what you mentioned about your pilot project in Malta and Italy, right? About addressing smugglers. Could you explain that a bit? What exactly is happening there? What exactly is your role? What exactly is happening there? And also with regards to third countries especially. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All of you are being succinct and to the point. Thank you very much. Next is Mr. Lopez Aguilar. Juan Fernando, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Visser, for your presentation. Thank you for being here once again, delivering the annual report of your office, which I'm sure you know that I appreciate and evaluate of the utmost importance for the works of this LIBE committee in regards the fundamental rights involved of those claiming for asylum or international protection or whatever kind or whatever means at the doorway of the European Union member states. But I would make it short in a question related to a point that puzzles many, that's my experience, whenever we report on the matter. In every conference, before every audience we might encounter, there is always a recurrent issue. Is misperception all around the place, spread all about Europe. It's impressive to get to know how little people do know about real facts about asylum system in Europe and asylum facts in Europe. There are so many who are convinced that southern European member states are overwhelmed with asylum seekers. The other way round. Those who are receiving the heaviest load happen to be Germany, Britain, France, Sweden. Not exactly. Those who are most exposed. How to explain this heterogeneous delivery when it comes to implementing common asylum system and common asylum laws and common asylum obligations, because it's not only that there is a European step when regards the legal sphere, it is also that we are all a binding international convention, Geneva and the New York Protocol protecting asylum, 51/67. That's most amazing. How can we better report and inform and spread the news about real facts when it comes to asylum? And my second question, and how do we explain those incredibly varied and heterogeneous levels of delivery when implementing rules that are supposed to frame up to some kind of a European common asylum system, which is precisely the jurisdiction of your office? And second, how can we make sure, because that is also a recurrent issue, how can we make sure that every asylum applicant at least has a chance? Every asylum potential applicant or seeker at least has a chance. I'm talking about the so-called hot-spot devolutions, the so-called defaults to the principle of non-refoulement. How can we make sure that, for instance, that when we are receiving some apparently irregular migrants onshore, which is usually the case of Ceuta, Melilla, the southern beaches of southern Spain, or, for that matter, Malta, the Greek islands, or Lampedusa, or the Aeolic Islands in southern Italy. How can we make sure that where there is a potential asylum seeker involved, he or she at least has a chance? Because the way in which member states proceed include, most naturally, putting them in some kind of a center, whatever name, and implementing repatriation treaties with bordering countries or the countries of origin of which the boat is suspected to have come from, but not a chance for them to really seek for asylum and file the case in proper terms. How can we better improve that kind of delivery when it comes to those most sensitive and hotspot devolutions situations? Those would be my two questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. I understand what you're saying. I mean, I saw the recent asylum stats. The numbers for Germany, Italy, UK are very high, relatively high. So I understand that. But obviously the perception is because the asylum seekers are going to southern countries first, so that's natural. So you can see where the pressure is. But those stats are very high. So I understand the point you're making on that first point that you made. Thank you for that. The next one is Mrs. Spinelli.
Grazie.
Thank you, Dr. Fischer, for that report. I have one question to you. Given that Mare Nostrum is not really going to be replaced by Frontex Plus, and given that there is so much uncertainty about the financing of Frontex Plus and its real tasks, couldn't one envisage having an EASO official present at every Frontex search and rescue mission in order to ensure that the asylum seekers' rights are always protected? I say this because there's an agreement from 2012 between EASO and Frontex. And let me just in conclusion recall that unfortunately there are countries, including my own country, Italy, where people speak very properly about the need to fight organised crime, and I do this too, but unhappily, when it comes to individual search and rescue operations, people who save, people who pick up the people in distress at sea end up being punished for it.
Next is Mrs. Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. I have two questions. First, I see that asylum seekers have the right to interpretation. That right has been enshrined in a directive. But I have some questions about the provision of interpreters to deaf people, people with special requirements for communication. How can we ensure that deaf asylum seekers and people with mental disabilities can receive good quality interpretation support? For deaf people, obviously, you need sign language interpreters. But the question is, in what language? How can you find sign interpreters in the right language? Has any consideration been given to this problem? And a second point, when it comes to particular vulnerabilities. In 2013, a lot of attention has been paid to vulnerable migrants, and that's very important because there are serious dangers of abuse in that context. We've seen that people in Belgium with a disability have been forced to beg, which is another problem. But I would like to put a question. Has any consideration been given within the project for lesbians and transsexual individuals? Well, there has been attention given to that, but has there been any attention given to women who've been sexually abused or mutilated, women who've suffered genital mutilation? Well, I've seen that referred to, but I haven't seen any reference to particular target groups, people with a disability. So my question to the Commission is, do you intend in this forthcoming period to set up a project to pay particular attention to people with a disability, because there's a great deal of diversity within that group of people. So there are people who are blind, deaf, with a mental handicap and so on. This is a very diverse population, but they are particularly vulnerable individuals, so I would urge you to take those concerns into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Stevens. I think we were justified in having a short intro from Robert, and now having a long list. We've still got quite a long list, so I'm just asking if anyone else wants to speak before I close the speakers list. Is there anyone else, so that we can get a proper... You're on it. You're on it. Anyone else? Yeah. Just two more people. Okay. Speak now or forever. You know the usual. That it? Yes, everyone? Okay. I warned Robert that he would get this many questions. He didn't believe me. Okay. Okay, colleagues. So the next speaker is Mr. Stadowski. Which language is it going to be today?
Today, Czech.
Czech, okay.
Okay, děkuju. Prvně bych děkuju pan...
Thank you. First of all, I'm grateful for the floor, and secondly, thank you for the excellent report, which gives a very clear picture through the graphs. It's very well prepared. In fact, Dr. Fischer, this is one of the best reports that we've ever had here. For as long as I've been a member of this Parliament. So really compliments for that. The Czech Republic is one of the countries which many Russians choose as a place to go to. And we get a lot of asylum seekers from Russia. This is because of the reprisals that the Putin regime is carrying out against various sorts of people that he doesn't like. The mothers, for example, who publish lists of their sons killed in Ukraine. Then there are other parts of the Russian Federation, like Chechnya, where people get punished for things which would not expose them to any kind of punishment in the European Union, or at most would expose them to a small fine. So many cases of this sort come from that country. So my question to you is this. Do you plan, for example, greater flexibility in such cases? Because there are a great many people in the Russian Federation who are suffering very great problems of this kind.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Mrs. Vergiat. Speak for as long as you want. Knock yourself out.
Non, je ne vais pas abuser du montant.
No, I won't abuse my speaking time, Mr. Chairman. I shall try to be quick. I support what's been said about this excellent report. It is indeed, it contains analysis and explanation, which is both important and interesting. But let me sound an alarm, and this applies both to you and to others. But don't be careful about using percentages. If you talk about 416% increase or 98% increase, I'm inclined to ask you exactly what you're up to. How are these figures going to be used by some people? And you see this straight away in the press. It's dangerous, and it could be used against the interests of the people we're trying to protect. You have to consider relative to what? A 700% increase from a base of a few thousand is still a flow that needs to be kept in context. And these are worrying figures when they're presented in this way. What your report stresses once again is the great differences that there are between the situations of different asylum seekers, and also the great differences in the way they're treated in member states, in terms of reception, in terms of how they can put in their request, in terms of what happens after they put in their request. One thing that I'm struck by is the increase in intermediary protection, interim protection, at the expense of the status of refugee status itself, with once again variations from one member state to another. And my question is, isn't this European plus not going to end up being bad for the recipients themselves? Because the legislation might have ended up protecting them more if it was cast in more traditional terms. And then there's another question, and this is something that I don't think is paid enough attention in your report. This is the question of the countries of arrival. We all know about them, but the real destination of the asylum seekers, Calais. First of all, there are 2,000 people. Once again, let's get this in context. There are 2,000 people at Calais. And why are they all there in Calais, Mr. Chairman? Because people who come to Calais are English speakers. They're coming from Eastern Africa. They speak English. They don't want to stay in France. They don't want to stay in Italy or Greece. If you don't take that view into your parameters, you're not going to cover the situation. So you need an overall focus. And then let me return to Eritrea, because I don't think your response was sufficient. I think real work is needed on this. And I think we also need to pay attention. I met some Eritreans yesterday, so I'm still keen on the subject. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what they told us. In an asylum office, one was asked to get his diplomas certified by the Eritrean embassy. You can see what a funny idea that was. And then proof, another one was asked for proof that he really had been imprisoned in Eritrea. But well, we all know that Eritrea is an open prison, and most people who are in prison there are not even there under any legal sort of conditions. So I think there's still room for further effort there.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to lose any more members, because this is a really important point, and I want to get a substantive response from Robert Visser. So could the next speakers all help me by just trying to stick to a minute or so? Some of you spoke in the last debate, so if you could try and be as succinct as possible, starting with Mr. Becker from the EPP. Mr. Becker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got two specific questions. Dr. Visser, the Chairman's already pointed out that your report here to the committee has to be compared with that of 2013 on the question of visas. The visa codex, for example, interests me. What are the forecasts that the visa code reform on the one hand and the round-trip visa relative to that on the other hand? And I have a small criticism of the round-trip visa. The number of round trips in Europe is one that I think needs to be taken with some skepticism. And the numbers of performing artists travelling around as well. So can you give us some forecasts about these two things, please?
Thank you very much. And Mr. Corrao.
Grazie.
Thank you, Chairman. I shall be very brief. I just wanted to ask the agency, that's to say Dr. Fischer, if you're happy with the operation of the Dublin regulation. Is it not the case that this current regulation simply shows how disunited the Union is? As if you look at the question of migration or of asylum, we're still on the intergovernmental method instead of the community method. But citizens think, therefore, that the Union just doesn't exist on this subject, and it just leaves the whole subject to the member states who receive the biggest migratory flows. And then another question about the special support program for Italy, which runs out in December this year. Is there any plan to extend it? Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Kenichi.
Grazie Presidente e grazie Mr. Visser.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Fischer, for this full and exhaustive report on your agency's work. We have to recognize, however, that this is a report about an alarming situation with a 30% increase over last year in the number of requests for protection. So I wonder, and I ask you, whether the data from the report, including the ones about the rate of recognition in each member state, according to the member state that's looked at the request, whether these figures couldn't be used to produce a more effective strategy in three respects. First of all, more commitment to prevent and management the flows, to forestall them, which of course is linked always to critical situations, not in the whole world, if I can say so, but essentially on the borders of the Union or near them, in the Balkans, in Syria, in the Caucasus and in Ukraine. And then couldn't the data also be used to harmonize the way the Dublin system works in individual member states, including with regard to transfer requests? The aim being to achieve a more homogeneous distribution, one easier to manage, that will produce a better integration of asylum seekers. As we know that so far they've been taken in essentially in Germany, France, in Sweden, in the United Kingdom, and in my country, Italy. And third question, couldn't the data be used to reduce the time that it takes to examine requests, which we all know is too long, particularly in some countries in regard to certain flows? For that purpose, the early warning system could be used for better preparation and management of crises. This is in Article 33 of the new Dublin regulation. And lastly, a question. Can you give us a bit more information already on your work with Eurojust and Europol to fight against organised crime and the organised criminal organisations that manage the migratory flows?
Next is Mrs. Metsola. Roberta.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions in short. On relocation, I would like to continue with what I said previously. Relocation this year has decreased, and the representative of the Commission said that in November there will be a forum, an annual forum on relocation. we've already spoken about this, Dr. Visser. However, I would like to highlight a point that in the mandate of EASO there is a specific role on relocation, and I expect EASO to take a more prominent role in this process so that we can see and we can address specifically the concerns and the difficulties of individual member states so that they accept this concept that it is something voluntary that works and that can show solidarity. Second point on the Mediterranean Task Force and the EASO action plan. In the report you referred to this. You spoke, the report spoke about the conditionality, the fact that ESO might have more relations with specific countries, and there will be protection and protection programs in Libya, for example. Can you please expand on this? What are the aims of EASO so that we don't just see the text and the report and the annual report, but we do a follow-up as well in the months and in the coming years? Thank you.
Thank you. And Cecile Kiengi.
Sì. Grazie anche da parte mia per...
Thank you for my part too for the report. It will allow us better to understand the subject as well as the work that's being done. My question is quite a short one. There's this 2001 Directive 55, which sets minimum standards for granting temporary protection in the case of a massive inflow. But it's left up to the Commission to establish what number is required to bring this into force. I wonder if we couldn't change the numerical criteria for applying this directive, because there are many things in it that I think would be very helpful to the member states and would allow them to work towards solidarity and cooperation as the directive stipulates. Secondly, on the basis of your analysis, do you think there's room to change the criteria for establishing legal status? Because if you look at the countries that many people come from that are asking for asylum, and they don't all come from conflict countries. They might be coming from a country with a drought, for example. So perhaps we could review the definitions for the various kinds of refugee. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final speaker is Ms. Schlein.
Grazie Presidente, ringrazio anch'io.
Thank you, Chairman, and I too am grateful to Dr. Visser for his report. Many have already said the serious instability around the Mediterranean and in the Near East, and this has had a significant effect on flows towards Europe, particularly towards countries that have a southern border. Many colleagues have said that they understand the dramatic situation of refugees, but Europe can't solve everyone's problems. And, of course, international law as well as European law establishes our legal obligations. It isn't just a moral obligation to assist people who are fleeing war or torture or discrimination. So everybody seems to share concerns for the fact that the Mediterranean, the European Sea, is turning into an area of tragedy and death. Dr. Visser, don't you think it would be better to look at solutions anticipating situations, setting up safe havens where you could ask for asylum in transit countries, involving the international organizations, preventing the situation where these people end up in the hands of people smugglers and drifting around on the seas?
Thank you very much. Handing over to you now, Dr. Visser, the whole range of operational, political, legal questions. And also for some members who have gone, this is being live streamed, so please address those questions as well if you can. We're quite squeezed for time, but this is an important issue, so please take your time and try and get through as many as you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much to all members. It is an impressive list that you have put forward on a very important subject. So I'm most happy both with the questions and the possibility to give some reaction. There are certain themes that you share, and there are very specific questions as well. I will try to balance in my answer as much as I can. Apologies if I miss something. That is not intentionally, I assure you. Maybe start with the annual report. What is the meaning of it? Can we use the data to look to the future? How can we be prepared? What is the early warning? They all come together, I think, with the same effect. It's my firm belief that a European agency is about added value. If not, we should immediately stop the work. So what we are looking at, is to see in areas where so far we do not have the possibility or did not seek the possibility to work. That starts with data and information. Mr. López Aguilar had a very principal question, I would say, on the whole debate. That is a sort of summary. Are we correct? I'm slightly changing the question. Are we correct in what we see? Are there misperceptions? And can we provide better facts and figures to have a different sort of debate, a higher level debate? As a humble executive director of an operational agency, I see it as my task to provide the facts and figures to start with. And yes, there are many misperceptions. I will not start naming them, because that might trigger a discussion for which we have no room at this moment, but I'm entirely available if at any time that is a subject of discussion. I think that is the major contribution of an annual report, that from year to year we give the data that you can use in your political work, and to say, maybe we should change this. Maybe if this is the real facts and figures, if this is the reality, then we might give different messages, change our messages, or change our legislation, because that is something which is in your hands. Very practical. What is the early warning part of our work? We have started now about 2 years ago in asking member states to provide on a monthly basis data, so that we can from month to month show the changes, the trends in the member states and in the EU as total. That is totally new. We publish this in public. The monthly basis is, to my regret, not public, but maybe later on, one day we will have it also public, because it's important to see the trend. And here I agree and disagree with the remark on percentages. I fully agree percentages can totally fool you and disorientate you. At the same hand, we are very much in need on a day-to-day operational basis for an answer on the question, is there a change? Is the trend upwards or downwards? For very practical reasons, it's the capacity that member states have to organize. So if you have, even from a low number, 600% increase, then that means something for your resources. That means something for the Minister of Finance. That is very down to earth. I'm sorry for that, but that's also part of the operational reality. So yes, we will be and even more careful with percentages. Your point is taken, but it is not possible not to work with changes. Otherwise, you can't work with trends. Early warning is, since we started, has become, I should say, an instrument for member states, for the Commission and for ourselves, of course, in our day-to-day work, to be better prepared. To give you one example, where no one on individual basis had any indications of a change of influx from the Ukraine, thanks to our system of data collection, monthly data collection, we were the first one to notice it and to warn the member states concerned that, one, they are not alone, two, that they better prepare, because it is not an incident, but it is something that is hopefully not too long, but at least up till now, certainly a serious situation. Same with Iraq, same with Syria. So it is a practical instrument that gives added value. It also gives an interesting new phenomenon that we didn't realize so far. If I take the Eritreans as an example, we saw in total a big increase and still increasing number of Eritreans. But we see those groups, and they are groups in this case, changing from member state to member state. Member states that suddenly had about 800% increase, and 2 months later back to a very low number. And we see then suddenly the numbers going up in another member state. Realizing that the total is still rising, it is a phenomenon that we certainly follow very closely. Eritrea is, and I hope my remark was not misunderstood, we don't know the reasons, but the recognition rate for Eritrea is very high. It is a serious situation in that country. It has been for long. So member states are certainly not underestimating it. But having said that, it is good to go deeper in the phenomenon and to look into the reasons behind, so that we can even better react. The consultative forum, that is our organized, institutionalized dialogue with civil society. Last year only we had 70 dedicated contacts, dialogues, interventions with NGOs, making them part of our work, using their input, asking their advice. They, of course, remain responsible from their point of view. We remain responsible for our point of view. But there is an increasing interaction with civil society. Actually, after this meeting, I have a meeting with the advisory group of the consultative forum. So it is on a daily basis, Ms. Lambert, that we take care of that very important part of our work. See in a number of specific questions. Regional protection program. That is, I can take it broader, because the number of questions about external dimension, third countries and regional protection program is one of them. What is exactly the role of EASO here? I take a cautious look here, because there are many areas and many policy areas, I should say, dealing with the rest of the world. Foreign policy, development aid, and many others, economic, social. migration is only one area. Of course, we think it's extremely important, but we should also be realistic. It is only one area. And only there, and that's also part of my motto, where we can have added value, there it is useful to go into. But we will not be able, from a migration point of view, to change the rest of the world. So realistic approach is absolutely necessary. That is also how I read the different remarks from the new president of the new Commission about the role of EASO and the external dimension. Not to go and change Africa and become a support bureau for Africa. That is not our role, but certainly on very dedicated projects on capacity building, on stimulating human rights in certain countries. At this moment, I do not know if Libya is the most easy one, but if you think about Tunisia, Jordan, Morocco, there certainly we can be working in a positive mood to foster what is in our mission. Secondary movements. Asylum seekers or migrants moving from one country to another. We used to call it asylum shopping, but that word is no longer very often used. But still, it is one way of looking at the problem. In the Dublin regulation, already long ago, we tried to diminish, or at least to reduce the number of asylum shopping possibilities. That is maybe one of the misperceptions. The reason for persons, for migrants, to go to a certain country are manifold. That can be language, that can be history, that can be family, that can be communities, legal communities. If we look, for example, at Ukraine, Ukraine has very many, widespread, nearly all member states, legal communities, people who have work, who have an excellent job, and who just migrated, like many of us in the past have migrated. And once a situation of violence, like in the Ukraine, happens, that triggers people to go to places where they heard stories, they have families, they have all sorts of contacts. So it's not a one-to-one story why people go to a certain country. We are assessing it and analyzing it more and more, and I hope that in the not too far future we will be able to give you some more analysis to feed in this important debate based on facts and figures. And then, of course, there are many political questions coming from that. But at least I can promise you that we will do our best to provide you with the input. Let me see. This is also partly an answer on the relations. Here we have different realities, not to say misperceptions. If migrants come directly from a place outside of the EU to the EU, you have to pass a border. And though all member states are border member states, because we have all international airports, most of them come by a land border or a sea border. That means that countries that have such a border have more chance of getting asylum seekers of that category. But it's not the only category. And that's also facts and figures. we should not underestimate the large number of asylum seekers that come by legal means, who have visa, who were students, and suddenly take an Iraqi student from the region of the IS. They have a right, and understandably, they can ask for asylum. So it's not true, the picture that every asylum seeker, the total number that you see in the report and the total number that I gave for this year, all in the last weeks or months came by borders. They might have come in a very different way. Of course, also by borders, but in a legal way. It's good to keep that in mind as well. Since I am in Italy now, the special support plan on Italy, a few questions. The aim of this support plan is a very tailor-made, dedicated action to improve sectors of the asylum process in Italy. On country of origin information, on the mechanism, the system of Dublin, on the statistical data. Italy is a federal state, federal-like state, and has very different traditions of dealing with information, and we support Italy to improve that statistical system for good reasons. It ends, the actual plan ends end of this year. We are in discussion right now, actually. One of my colleagues is in Rome at this moment to discuss a extension or an adjusted plan for next year. At the same time, having the situation in the Mediterranean as it is, we look into a special program to see what we can do in supporting Italy in the very large numbers they get from overseas in the Mediterranean at this moment. The implementation of the asylum package. It is declared by everybody important that we concentrate on consolidating what we have and implementing according to the agreement as has been reached. So that is our focus for at least this year and next year. Without losing sight on the fact that migration is a rapidly developing and dynamic field, and that the solutions of today are not always the solutions of tomorrow. So we keep an open eye on possibilities to improve, even though we work on implementation. Implementation is done on a large number of areas. Training is a very important one. All the member states have to train their own staff on the new asylum package, on the new legislation, and where is the added value more clear than having one common training system instead of 28 different member states that all have to instruct their different training institutes and asylum officers. There were questions about the project with Malta and Italy on the phenomenon of smuggling, trafficking. We call it facilitating, to use a neutral term, of facilitating the movements in the Mediterranean. The project is, at this moment, in its actual concept, dedicated to the phenomenon itself, not to individual cases. That's an explicit choice, because we want to try to generate information where so far it has never been done. We can be quite sure that everybody who is in one boat, and it's very practical, has been one way or the other in touch with an organization, because there are not several organizations that organize one boat. That is nearly impossible to think about. So there must be somewhere someone who is involved in organizing, in facilitating that boat. And by using the information, abstract, anonymous, and totally on a high level, not in any way individual, of those who ask asylum and have been in one boat, we can compare the information and learn about how the system of facilitation works. We know something about it, but that is very incident-based information, and this is the first time that we try to get a real view on the total. Well, I'm actually quite far. Few specific questions. Mare Nostrum is not replaced by Frontex. That is being answered by the Commission already before I took the floor, so I can refer to that. The presence of EASO in Frontex operations. That's a very serious point, and that is high on the agenda both of EASO and of Frontex. We cooperate closely, have started last year, on training of also border guard officials. So it's not necessary that someone with an EASO hat is present, but that the people, the border guards that are in the Frontex operations have the right training, the right knowledge, and that is something we work on and we will continue working on. The interpretation question related to vulnerability in general. We have, together with the Commission, a large program on the different aspects of vulnerability. As you have seen in our work program, we will continue that next year. Special focus on vulnerable groups, gender and gender-related issues. It is a huge area. We have to prioritize. But we have taken note of all your different remarks and certainly take that into account. Relocation, we are very much aware of the role that EASO has on relocation, and we are very much aware of the political reality around relocation. So I was happy that the word voluntary was stressed, because that is the only way to proceed. We are active part of the relocation forum, and we will continue to monitor and to see and look into instruments that are possible to improve this. Last but not least, many of you have spoken about resources and budget. I'm most grateful. I will not repeat what I said in the beginning, but you're absolutely right. The expectations are extremely high, and relatively, the resources are relatively limited, with all the consequences. Thank you very much, and excuse me if I have not answered all of you. I'm perfectly willing to do, but...
Robert, thank you very much indeed. And if you've not answered any questions, it's because you were truncated by me, because I can see from your notes you've indicated every member who asked a question, you've listed everyone, and you've got an answer to everyone. But we are running very much over time, and you've tried to answer everyone. I mean, I'm looking at your priorities for 2015, and I just want to say again to members that the key point here is that you have an operational role, but it's a bit like Frontex, but probably more so, that the support office has huge expectations placed on it, because it doesn't just have the operational role, it has to promote good asylum decision making, synergies on migration, and a whole range of things where the expectations are just so enormous and it simply can't be met by the resources. So the debate we've had on the support office now is way beyond anything that you can obviously deliver. What I'm saying to members today is that we, in conjunction with the debate on the annual report, we will make proposals within coordinators to take issues forward, not just on the individual dossiers which will come up in 2015, but also tangible points that were raised by members. We will detail them and take proposals forward through coordinators, so nothing will be wasted. And obviously you will come back in relation to the 2015 priorities, and we'll hear from you next year, because as you know there were obviously clear interest in the LIBE committee and a clear formal connection with us. So I want to thank you again for coming today and for giving such detailed response to our questions. Thank you again. Thank you very much.